Hi, Jim Roddy here from the RSPA, jumping in before today's podcast to make sure you know registration's now open for Retail Now 2025, the Retail Technology Channel's #1 trade show, education conference, and networking event. Join RSPA and Retail IT Channel leaders live and in person July 27th through the 29th on the Strip in Las Vegas at Caesars Palace. With nearly 200 exhibitors, Retail Now is one-stop shopping for VARs and ISVs. And with an expected 1,600 or more attendees, it's the place for extreme industry connectivity. Across just 48 hours, you'll meet new partners and new solution providers who can accelerate the success of your business. Now, as I record this, early registrations are trending well ahead of many prior years, so don't miss out on what could be the best Retail Now ever. If you're serious about the Retail IT channel, you have to attend Retail Now 2025, again, July 27th through the 29th in Vegas. Retail Now is where the industry meets. For all the details and to register at discounted early bird rates, visit the Retail Now website today at gorsp.org/retail now. Again, gorspa.org/retail now. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, as always, we talk with leaders in the retail IT channel and seek advice from them. Now, in this episode, we're going to talk with someone who can help lead retail and hospitality solution providers into two emerging technologies. So, Jim Hilton is the Director of Networks and Connectivity at value-added distributor BlueStar. Jim has nearly 45 years of experience in the IT channel, about 15 of those with Symbol, Motorola, Zebra. So he's had a front row seat to industry acquisitions as well. And before he joined BlueStar, he was with Advantix Solutions as their Director of Strategic Growth. And among the other titles Jim has held over his career are Director of Product and Sales Strategy, Director of Vertical Marketing, VP of Sales for Mobile Solutions, Senior Director of Manufacturing and Field Mobility, and Company President for an integrator. Jim, you and I have been talking for years. It is great to have you as a guest on the Trusted Advisor.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me in, and I look forward to the next hour and visiting with your group.
Excellent. And so let's give our audience a little bit of background of the genesis of how this podcast came to be, and then you can tell me if I'm telling the story accurately. So January of this year, January 2025, we were at the NRF event, and I was just outside the show floor and bumped into you and Mark Fraker, and you had just started with BlueStar, and we were talking about your new role. And I was intrigued because many, traditional point of sale VARs are hesitant about networking, right? It's outside their comfort zone. It's more in their panic zone. And so we said, well, we should do a podcast. And so the goal of this podcast is twofold. One is to inform VARs of the opportunity in these technologies, but then also to lower their hesitancy to expand into offering solutions that are related to networking, mobility, and connectivity. So, Jim, did I say that accurately? Is there anything you would add to that?
I think you did. Probably the only thing I would suggest is change is coming. Change is already happening, and we can look. We can ignore it, or we can take advantage of it. That's our choice.
Exactly. Very good. Agree with you 100%. So, as we mentioned at the outset, so your background includes working with networking and connectivity technology in retail and hospitality, but then also in the more traditional applications like warehousing. So, can you talk first about the different definition that you see it of networking in retail and hospitality versus the more traditional definition of it in other verticals?
Sure. First of all, let's dissect that in that category of networking. That is very much a part that is changing dramatically. And as we brought that up, stood up this division within BlueStar, we took careful aim at that title. Networking today is very different than what we would think about 10 years ago. Networking 10 years ago was, what's your Wi-Fi? Tell me about that router. Today, we think networking takes every physical form of connection at the edge to bring data back to the house, up to the cloud, whatever term that you want to use for that, and bring it back at a time where it's still actionable. So the key point there to networking is providing actionable visibility to whatever component, whatever management needs that data while they can still do something about it. Yeah, that's
Got
networking.
it. Got it. Okay, some
Connectivity,
more read time. Okay.
yeah, connectivity is an animal unto itself. Um, we all saw somewhere around 2003, 4, 5, the idea of wide area connectivity became viable and economical enough to look at putting it into the enterprise. Um, it was candidly shoehorned into the industry uh, by a lot of great carriers, partners of ours, that took consumer-based connectivity and tried to fit it into our industry. That has evolved, and probably 5 years ago now, it took a dramatic evolution in that the idea of multi-carrier connectivity. In other words, one SIM, one eSIM that could recognize multiple carriers around the country, around the state, around the region, around the world, and literally in a nanosecond move from one strong signal, one strong tower to another, to another, to another. Therefore, operationally keeping that edge connected. So connectivity is a use case unto itself, and there's lots of choices out there, and you almost have to peel back the onion to see how that fits as a VAR goes to market, how they want to take that to market.
Great. Thank you for that. We're going to talk about use cases in a second. I want to ask you about that. But where does IoT fit into this? Like the Internet of Things, which I have to say, as so my background's in communications and English and all that, just having something that's called things, it's like it couldn't be more
Yeah.
vague. Like people are like, why are people confused with Internet of Things? It's like the two most general terms in the world, Internet and things, just kind of crammed together. So where does IoT fit in, and is there a better phrase or acronym that we can refer to?
I watched that buzzword get born in fourth generation manufacturing scenario. It literally is almost the way that I'm very operational in both my background and my thought process. The Internet of Things, effective optimizing for the Internet of Things is what I've already said one time, putting actionable visibility in front of the component or the management that can still do something about
Yes.
it to affect change.
Yeah.
That's IoT in my view.
Got it.
And,
Okay. So
and
it's all
it
tied into
changes,
this.
yeah, and its definition changes depending on the use case.
Got it. Great. Thank you. All right. So let's talk about those use cases. Let's first talk about networking and connectivity use cases in retail. And then I'm going to ask you next about hospitality. So give us a retail use case that involves, I'm going to say network and connectivity, not Internet of Things.
There you go. There you go. All right. So, and these are fun examples. These are very real examples. First of all, I've every research document I've seen from Gardner to Forrester to even just this past week at a conference, one of the vendors actually presented very valid 50 to 60% increase over the next 3 to 5 years in 5G movement in retail. In retail and hospitality. So that we can't ignore that. We can leverage it
Yes.
and move to it and provide for it. Some great examples in use cases. If you think about something that we've driven by every summer, in my memory, think about a fireworks tent. That pop-up is there, and it's only there for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they'll take your credit card and they'll take your $100 or $500 or whatever you're going to spend on that. That is a retail operation. And it's almost stating the obvious that they're a 5G scenario taking that charge. All right. Walk through a mall and suddenly you find many times that a kiosk sitting in the middle of a retail operation is actually doing transactions. If you peel back the onion of that, it's a pop-up. They brought their own network. And in simple terms, underneath the table or right around their POS, or maybe just simply attached to the tablet that they're working, or the credit card device that they're working with, they are connected to the cloud, and they can do a transaction in a split second, and they can do it all day, every day, all night, every night. There is a great example. I'm going to give, if I can give a second example.
Oh, yeah, the more the merrier, because I think it's going to make way clear in the mind of our listeners, like how exactly does this apply? Because even like I said, Internet of Things is just couldn't be more vague. Networking connectivity can mean a whole bunch of different things. So yeah, the more use cases, the better, Jim.
All right, so let's coin the phrase. They brought their own network. Bring their own. Okay. Next example is more industrial, so it fits my history and my comfort zone a whole lot better. Substantial, I'll keep all these names to myself, but substantial operation is looking at a proof of concept for a dramatic improvement in RFID. Okay, so how do they prove that out without taking extensive time to work with the existing network administrators and actually fit that into a store environment to do a full test? It could take months just to get the proof of concept ready to stand up. Or you can take your own network. You take your devices, you take your software that's involved in that, and you put a 5G only router sitting in the back of the store, access points spread across the store, and stand up in a matter of weeks, maybe even days. You stand up that proof of concept that's a very real flow of goods or flow of data to solve that out. And that allows for that proof of concept to move forward, that allows for that sales cycle to move forward and speed along to actually turning it into a real thing. Now, the beauty of the one that in my mind is it can stay that way. Once the proof of concept gets set up and gets proven out and they say, this is good, let's keep it that way.
Yes.
You can keep it at 5G, particularly with today's connectivity that we'll get to in a moment, but it can stay that way, or it can be folded into the network in place permanently and take the steps after the fact rather than taking the steps just when it's a flyer that this might be something that the organization wants to do. So in the case that I'm talking about, it was an extensive RFID asset tracking use case, and it stood up very quickly in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks, and as candidly, it's running still today.
Interesting. Great. Yeah. And it's funny. Your first two examples were very small, and then your last example was on a way broader, larger scale. So that was retail. Can you share with us a hospitality use case, or more than one, that you think would be instructive for our listeners?
How many times have you walked into McDonald's in the last 6 months?
My wife is a vegan. I'm a vegetarian, so our McDonald's visits are incredibly low. But we walk into like Subway, Chipotle, places like that. So
instead of people behind the counter standing there saying, "Can I take your order?" all of a sudden you're on a self-serve kiosk.
Yep.
That kiosk could be attached to the Wi-Fi, like it's always been done. It could be attached to the Wi-Fi with a failover. There's a new term that we've talked about here. The audience knows about failover. But the same way that a POS system in a grocery store, my first exposure to failover is that the kiosk could be on the Wi-Fi, except it has a 5G failover in case the Wi-Fi goes out. They can keep doing transactions and keep selling those burgers. In the case of where I just talked about. Or bring your own network. In other words, it is primarily a 5G, could be only a 5G scenario, and have literally that transaction go exactly the same way as the reason why I use that pop-up fireworks tin as an example. Exactly the same scenario, except now we're standing in front of a quick serve restaurant, and you've got 5 kiosks there that 5 people can go get their own order, take their own order, and process the order.
Got it.
That's a good quick hospitality quick serve. I'm going to give another one though.
Please.
I was really blown away with robotics in one of the BlueStar events where effectively a robot was I think they were in the back room of a grocery store cleaning the restroom. The robot was cleaning the restroom. Now that robot effectively loses its mind if it's not ever connected. So effectively think about a 5G enabled robotic unit that is charged and architected to go take care of job X. That's another use case, kind of a out on the cutting edge kind of use case, but that same robotic scenario where that robot has its task. It could be in nursing homes, moving refreshments around the room. It could be in hotels, delivering room service. In every one of those cases, there is a network inside that robot, and there's a 5G connection. Or if they want to put a risk to it, it could be on the Wi-Fi, but the moment you do that, then you're at risk of the infrastructure of the Wi-Fi.
Yes. It's interesting you bring up that application because we're recording this the same week that I attended the Restaurants Canada show, and that the RSPA had our Canadian Community Networking event in a brewery, but it had a large, open area there. And BlueStar was one of the sponsors of the Canadian community. And one of your colleagues was walking around, like getting the lay of the land for everywhere, and then kind of programming the robot to make sure it went in the right areas there. And so the robot was roaming around for most of the show, and it never really struck my mind that it's got to be connected, or else it's like a runaway lawnmower or vacuum cleaner, I guess.
Pretty much. Or it stops.
Yes, which doesn't help at all with that. So, and let me ask 2 other use cases as well, and this will all kind of tie together. Like I said, at the Restaurants Canada show in their Startup Alley, there was a restaurateur there who had come up with his own solution, and it was he put tags of some sort underneath all his tables or devices, and then gave devices to all of his servers. And so that way, when they got within X amount of feet of the table, it kind of like reset this reporting that they had, where it just had the time, and it was like green, yellow, red, and you can just preset it. And that way, the servers can say, when's the last time I was at that table? They'd be able to look at the screen, and it would say, it'd be flashing red, it's been more than 5 minutes, and something like that. And so he uses that, and he said the server's self-managed, right? They just look at it at a glance and go, who have I not seen in a while? And he said it increased exponentially the spend of those tables because they were going back to them at the right frequency and not neglecting anybody. So I guess, does that fit into your use case of networking and connectivity in the hospitality space?
It does. It's what's called that local, but it literally is the craft that we took, or the care that we took in naming the division, kind of opens up to what is at the edge and how does it need to be connected.
Got it. Great. No, thank you for that. And it was funny because the guy's like, it's a really simple solution. He kind of taught himself programming. He's like, I don't want to grow this too big, too fast. We're like, this is neat. Like we thought a lot of folks would be interested in having that. So another application, I think you and I believe, had talked about this when we were planning this podcast. You talked about sensors on a beer keg that are able to tell the temperature and location. Can you talk about that application a little bit more? And I guess how that would work and what would be the value of
Uh,
that? Since I brought up breweries, like let's talk beer. So
let's talk beer. Yeah. So that's kind of a fun project. Matter of fact, it's blown into several other projects as well. So it's the one of the more simple point solutions that I've ever been around. Candidly, the form factor would be more difficult if we were a couple of years ago and needed a physical SIM, and we haven't really dove into connectivity at that level yet. But
mhm.
there's an eSIM scenario, and then there's a physical SIM, like we're all accustomed to the small chip that we put in the laptop or put in the phone. But the ability to have an edge device sensor that can be coded to communicate, hence eSIM, effectively allows that sensor to be a form factor conducive to something like a beer keg. It's not over bulky. It's not going to get knocked off because it's more or less tiny, but
Mhm.
it's doing its job. And what its job is where is the keg and how cold is it? And by the way, tell me that right now.
Mhm.
All right. So there is the solution to your point on the other gentleman. It is a straightforward point solution that says, what's my job?
Mhm.
Okay, I got it. Here's the answer. And connectivity back to a dashboard in the cloud that actually allows that management with actionable visibility that somebody's cooler is dropping or out of parameter on the temperature and our beer is going bad because it's getting warm, kind of thing. Or the beer kegs are walking away on us. They have a value to them, even if they're empty. And this helps track that. Um, think about, put your seller's hat on. Everybody on the call has got their seller's hat out. Think about how many hundreds of thousands of beer kegs there are in North America. Now expand that to the Americas, and now expand that to the world.
Mhm.
How much fun would it be to go attack that market? And that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm thinking a lot of our listeners have relationships right in those restaurant space or the nightclub or the breweries or things like that, that they'd be able to go beyond the point of sale and really
That's right.
help in the inventory standpoint. So,
Yeah.
and so some folks might be listening to this and saying like, okay, I know, like we just said, I have the relationships, but I don't know the skills related to, this technology. So are there unique skills and knowledge that VARs and ISVs need in order to offer networking and connectivity solutions? Or is it just more simple that they could lean on their vendors, lean on their distributors to go and bridge that gap?
Well, candidly, the last part of that, I believe, is the right answer. And candidly, all due respect, that points people to us. But that said, you don't, I cut up over my 45 years. I don't have to know the answer. I have to know the people that have the answer.
Right.
And I've made a practice of that over my career. Over my career. So in this world of technology and connectivity, I'm going to go back to that 5-year evolution from a very traditional carrier centric, where hardware pushes connectivity, pushes hardware, pushes connectivity, and we'd like to have you for 3 to 5 years. In an enterprise grade connectivity solution, the vendor that you contact really needs to know these kind of answers. Well, how in the world can I ensure, no matter where that keg is, that it's in the country, that I'm going to have one communication pipe that will get that data to my management in real time?
Mhm.
Um, I don't, if I'm the seller, if I'm the VAR, I don't have to have all that expertise. I just need to align myself with the provider that does have that expertise. And what this is probably the only commercial, I'll try to refrain from that. But what we did as we stood up this division is we seeked out, did a lot of due diligence. You already talked about my prior life. I went out and did some searching a bit outside the U.S. And found a couple of solutions that are just tremendous in that regard, and brought them into the fold of BlueStar. So that said, whether it's BlueStar or whether it's someone else, if you ask the right 5 questions, you can generally get an enterprise grade answer in that quick due diligence and take that to your customer.
Got it. And so they can guide, the vendor, the distributor can guide the reseller in terms of what questions they need to have, or site survey or things of that
Exactly.
nature. And then it seems like from an installation standpoint, because I can remember, I don't go back quite 45 years, but now I'm like, oh my gosh, I go back in like 30 years in this space almost. And I remember early on where it was talking to a VAR who did, some form of networking, but he was like, yeah, I got to bring in people to pull wires, right? Like I got to partner with an electrician. It seems like those days are over, right? This stuff, nothing has to be wired. And so that lowers the barrier for setting these up. Am I understanding that correctly?
You are, and to maybe take it a place that you were taking it, the beauty of today's technology is when you have yourself aligned with the right vendor, provider, communication expert, in that conversation with the end user, and you've got your expert sitting right next to you, somewhere in the first 30 to 45 minutes of Q&A in there, it moves from presentation to questions. Those questions start to sound like prove it. Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
The
Got it.
beauty of today, that connectivity scenario is that can be proven simply by saying, okay, we'll set up 2 of your devices in your field or in the end user's field, and we'll run that thing for about 3 weeks, and we'll show you every week your own data in that test. And 2 things happen there. Number one, operationally, you see that it happened, that connectivity did occur at a 99+% rate. And at the same time, you get to see the value prop of the dashboards that are provided to give that actionable visibility to management that I've harped on already in this call.
Yes. Yes.
So the sales cycle is as simply as tell me about it, prove it, propose it.
Great.
Deploy.
So before I take a quick commercial break, I guess I think of this like as a warning to our audience, and because I know one reseller talked about how he got burned on this, where he was like, I'm not doing Wi-Fi, I'm not doing this angle of the restaurant. Well, then someone else came in and did the Wi-Fi, and then they got to know the owners, and then they pitched him on the point of sale system and displaced him. And he was like, I'm never letting that happen again. So some of this stuff is outside folks' comfort zone. What's going to be really outside your comfort zone, for you in your panic zone, is when some point of sale paint, I guess anyway, something that you've kind of seen over the one provider for someone else before you.
Well, that has happened to me personally.
Okay. Yeah.
I have won a sales cycle, a substantial one, and only to have an individual, a carrier, come in 4 days later and say, well, why are you paying for that industrial grade device? Why don't you take this free device? And all of a sudden we won, and then we lost. So I felt that pain, and I'll never forget it. To that point, as we do our due diligence for the vendors, and as you should do your due diligence in the vendors, account control is king. It just is. So if I'm going to have a sell with scenario, I'm going to make sure that partner that I'm selling with is respectful of that sales cycle and that protective globe around that. And then the other side to it, real quick before your commercial, is the idea inside your organization of assigning a champion. Is okay. You are well, it's the same thing BlueStar did with me. They brought in a person that is responsible for networking and connectivity. And you think about all the lines that BlueStar has and all the thousands of customers that BlueStar has. And they brought in, and forget about me personally, they brought in an individual that my charter is to get up every day and focus on X.
Yep.
That can happen inside any VAR. And I highly recommend, if this is going to be a practice, operate in that manner.
Yes, we always recommend the concept of a PDR, person directly responsible, because if you have one PDR, stuff's going to get done. You have somebody you can turn to, but if it's shared among everybody, everyone's going to look at each other and go, I thought that was you. I thought that was you. So, all right, so let's pause here for a moment to let our listeners and viewers know about the Retail Solutions Providers Association. The RSPA is North America's largest community of retail technology VARs, software providers, vendors, and distributors. To accelerate your success through an RSPA membership, email membership@gorspa.org. Also, we want to say thanks to these companies who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our gold sponsors are CoCard, Epson, Heartland, and ScanSource, and our platinum sponsor is Jim Hilton's employer, BlueStar. And then finally, we want to make sure everybody knows that registration is now open for Retail Now 2025, the Retail IT Channel's #1 trade show, education, conference, and networking event. This year's event is set for July 27th through 29th at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. For more information, visit gorspa.org/Retail Now. Retail Now is where the industry meet. So, all right, Jim, so we were talking about the opportunity, we're talking about the technology, the use cases, how to implement it, but solution providers are like, okay, new technologies are interesting and they like that, but they really love new technologies that offer high margins and recurring revenue. So talk about the margins and recurring revenue opportunities with networking and connectivity. And then also if you can tie in talking about the typical sales cycles for these solutions as well, that would be helpful.
Very good. All right. So first thing, let's touch on, because I already touched on the idea of the two concepts. The idea of, in the networking component, having a proof of concept, it gets sped along, particularly if you have 5G, or that's kind of the slang word today for that, even though 6G will be here soon enough. Right now, the buzzword, like your term IoT before, in this real-time connectivity, 5G is the buzz that says, okay, that's a SIM card, or an eSIM. Okay, so in that regard, the proof of concept scenario, I would embrace that. The prove it mode, I would embrace that. That speeds along the sales cycle.
Okay.
And having that 5G connectivity built into your proof of concept allows you to bring your own network and prove out that solution that you're proposing very quickly. So you kind of look at, I'm going to put my VAR hat back on for a moment. You kind of look across your scenario of offerings. What do you want to deal with? What do you have the most right to compete with? And what are you best at? And by the time you answer those three questions, now you've got your first couple of three proofs of concept where you want to streamline this down to where it can be proven very, very quickly. Okay, that's the first thing. With that, and with connectivity, like we've already talked about, get ready for recurring revenue. I know we all talk about it. We all wish we had it. There's a moment of negative in that. If I'm used to getting a purchase order for $100,000, or $1 million. Recurring revenue doesn't work that way. This is effectively bits at a time that you have to be committed as you ramp. And as you ramp that, your scope is where do we want to be in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months in this recurring revenue stage. The beauty of it is it just keeps on giving. The negative to it is where you used to get $100,000, you're getting $1,000 a month. So MRR, monthly recurring revenue, just gets another definition, and it takes a commitment and a kind of an excitement about where we can be in 36 months versus where's my check today.
Yeah.
Does that help?
That does help. And then how about the margins for this? Because again, I was back at the Restaurants Canada show this week talking to some startup person, and they're like, I don't know if this would really work for the channel, right? We sell our solution for it's like $6 a month or something like that, and they're like, I can't share a lot of revenue from that. So what are the margins with these solutions?
The traditionals, and we know I've had a prior life and I've got a current life. Traditionals, they're in a sell with mode, and I'll come back to an elevated level of that. You can expect 10 to 15% of the proposed to the end user coming back to you in a recurring revenue. And the way I look at those, you say, well, how does that work? If I think about if I've got, let's go with that hospitality scenario, a quick serve restaurant, and I've got 1,500, 2,000 restaurants, I'm going to drop a solution into each one of those. Then there's recurring revenue that's happening in each one of those, in each one of those facilities coming out of that. So that's the way to view that dollar figure, and that's in a sell with scenario.
What do you mean when you say sell with?
Yeah. So one of the due diligence that we did is as we looked at our vendors in connectivity that we wanted to work with, is when I think everybody on the call knows that probably that BlueStar never goes to the end user. We work through value-added resellers. So when you are selling with, or with your listeners are selling with our connectivity solution, the agreement is between you and them. Okay. So there's an elevated, if I'm the value added reseller and I want more gross margin, and I've got kind of a decent support desk that I could stand up and tool up to take on first line support, and I would like to brand this as my own VAR logo.
Yep.
Then because I'm willing to take that first line support off the hands of our vendor that we're bringing to you, you can add a substantial percent to that, maybe up to 10% on top of. And that turns into, now take that 1,500 or 2,000 retail stores, and you just almost doubled you certainly took it up by 2/3, your gross margin on that, still in a recurring revenue framework. It's pretty good number.
Yeah, no, that is good. Thanks for spelling that out. And I know recurring revenue isn't just something that you recommend, or because as we mentioned at the outset, part of your background is serving as the president of an integrator, right? You were leading a solutions provider. So can you share from your perspective how important recurring revenue is to a VAR today? Again, because you've lived it, and for anybody out there who's thinking, boy, because people like recurring revenue, but they want to make sure they're able to get more of it, but not have to, sacrifice tons and tons of labor to get there. So talk about your perspective on the importance of recurring revenue for VARs.
I'll tell a fundamentally basic story of when I was president of our little company. It was in the world of license, working your heart out to get a purchase order, selling your software. We were back in the day of back-end systems that were very special to segments of market. It was a license plus maintenance method of pricing. So we'd sell our heart out. The customer would have to trust us, and if the license fee summed up to $500,000 or $1 million, that was the large number that we would try to go get, and then we would get our recurring revenue part would be maintenance. Mm-hmm. We didn't know the meaning of SaaS back then. I think year 2000. But my CFO partner and I got this bright idea of, we called it a usage agreement. Okay. And we repriced everything as a setup fee and a usage agreement spread over 5 years. And we took that to test, so took that to market to about 10 customers, and everybody loved it first. Unbeknownst to, or unexpectedly, they started negotiating, because we spread that usage agreement over 5 years. They started negotiating for year 5, month 1. We came out, and out of 10, I bet 7 of them did that. Yeah. And we came out of each one of those scenarios, and we said, all right, this is a good idea. I'll negotiate for year 6 all day long. Let's go ahead and get this done to get the project, because everybody on the call that sells software knows that even the maintenance overload or maintenance load associated with the customer diminishes over years, because they know how the software works. Yeah. So we literally exploded, because we would go into the account saying, here's the best part. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And oh, by the way, in year 6, we'll adjust your usage agreement by a substantial percent, and everybody would get started with that. So that was a very successful trial that sped into a practice of ours.
Nice. So it seems like in the sales process, you're making the sale, but you're talking about some discount or lower rate, but it's years down the road. So it's great that it's like that implied, hey, we're going to go with you, but let's talk about a really long-term relationship, which is what I'd say our listeners are looking for.
Yeah, it's what you want. Yeah.
And then it's not just, helpful for the day-to-day operations. It's also at some point, someone, the folks who are listening to this, if they own their VAR business or ISV business, they're going to sell it to somebody. And a VAR that was on stage at the NCC conference back in March was preaching recurring revenue. He was telling everybody, when someone looks to buy your business, nobody cares what you sold last month, right? They want to see that recurring revenue. I'm guessing, is that something that you've experienced as well? And right, the more recurring revenue, that is the actual value of your reseller business or your ISV business, not the product or I had a big month or a big quarter.
Yeah, 2 times in the sale of companies that very math equation has been true. They want to know the recurring revenue. What's going to happen over 5 years? I don't care what you did last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So a couple questions left for you, Jim. Can you help us see around the corner? Like, what are some of the next advancements that you're expecting in network and connectivity in the retail and hospitality segment?
Okay. First thing around the corner, right around the corner. As I started this call, even last week, and it was at an Ericsson conference. I'll go ahead and share that. Mm-hmm. That the speakers validated what in connectivity, the movement from traditional Wi-Fi to a 5G connected network, whether it's failover or whether it's primary. It's going to happen. It is happening. And every number that I looked at in those research, the research that I read, is greater than 50% over the next 3 to 5 years. And even at that conference, gentleman on stage posted, I can't validate his number, but he seemed to be right in line with all my research that I had gotten. I think it was 59% movement to 5G.
Away from Wi-Fi, just so I'm understanding, like instead of having,
yeah.
hey, I have to go into this, hotel or restaurant or mall and log onto their Wi-Fi, you're saying that'll end up running through 5G that everybody can connect to. Is that right?
That's correct. That's what all the research, even validated by let's say gentlemen on stage. I was enlightened that what I was reading, as valid as those sources were, that here's yet another person talking about the same thing, and it wasn't even part of his storyline at that point. So that was pretty powerful in my view. So that's what's right around the corner. The next thing in connectivity, I've already talked about the last 5 years watching these multi-carrier scenarios. There's a ton of them out there. So you have to ask the deeper questions to find out how they do what they do in their technology stack. Are they just resellers of others? Or is their architecture, their technology stack built by them? And those answers are very important, not only to your flexibility in a go-to-market plan, but it's also important to what the end price is going to be to your end user.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That said, if you find the right group or recognize that this is going to continue to evolve, more research papers that I've read, it's affectionately called SATCOM, satellite communications, is available today. It's just pricey.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's going to happen with that is that's going to evolve to the point of these ideas. I think this is Hilton's personal opinion. If we're having this conversation 5 years from now, the idea of hopping from a tower to a tower to a tower on Earth is going to be replaced with, I've got real-time connectivity always, no matter if I'm on the highest mountain away from any towers, simply because my signal is coming from and going through satellite communications. That's the other thing that I looked at in that technology stack as we looked at the vendor choices that we made for our customers is, are you building it and where are you taking it?
Yeah.
And I got my right answers, and that's why I aligned with who I did.
Got it. So that's an interesting shift. If VARs right now say, hey, I provide the Wi-Fi for my, restaurants or retailers, that whole Wi-Fi solution could be going away. Somebody could come in with something that's better, faster, cheaper. So we got to be on guard. So Jim, we're almost out of time, and we've covered a lot today, but in 30 seconds, what would be your final advice for our audience related to networking and connectivity?
Well, I've got 2 commercials. You already made one.
Okay. All right.
Retail Now, I would go, and we have a booth. If BlueStar has a booth, please stop by. The other thing is to dive into the connectivity side of us. We have a webcast slated for April 30th. That's going to be an hour long. Let's call it a lunch and learn. Simple as that, not sales pitch at all. Admittedly, you'll be coming to a BlueStar event and you'll be talking and hearing and listening to us, but it'll be one of the most educational things in this genre that I think you can have. And my recommendation would be to, number one, think about, if you really are dedicated to this, think about who you would assign as a champion inside your group, and explore and challenge whoever you use in this regard to simply prove it.
Excellent. That's advice, and that does it for this episode of the Trusted Advisor. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. Before we go, big thanks again to Jim Hilton for sharing his wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RSPA Marketing Director Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the retail technology ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, visit our website at GoRSPA.org. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.